is Saturday, and I'll be at come to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll? Present. Present.
Vice Chairman Jason Hall.
Present.
Member Bettler.
Here.
Member Connor.
Present.
Member Jack Foley.
Present.
Member McGarrett. Member Scholl.
Present.
Executive Director Miguel Nunez.
Present.
Legal Counsel Wayne Macacia.
Present.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The first item on the agenda, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on May 2nd, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain because I was not present.
I will as well.
Okay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Agenda item number 2, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on May 7th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I'll abstain from that one as well.
Thank you, Nico. Item number 3, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on May 15th, 2024. A lot of meetings in May.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. The ayes have it. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4, the board may discuss and vote upon the recommendations from the Legislative Committee on the attached legislative summary pending before the General Assembly. Commissioner Bettenker, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So we had a total of 5 pieces of legislation in front of us as we are nearing the end of the legislative session. Out of the 5, we voted to support 4 of them and to have no position in 1 of them. I don't know if the director wants to specifically talk about any of them,
You can.
or if any of the members want to hear about one of them.
In the past, I think you've summarized
Yeah,
the
happy to
no
do that.
position ones.
Yep. Happy to do that.
The ones that were, and the board has taken the recommendation of the legislative subcommittee on the others, but I'm not sure how you want to handle this.
Happy to. So the one that we have no position of is House Bill 8225 by Representative Chippendale, which would include in the recent law that was passed around drivers' privilege cards to include wording that the barcode in the back will not be used for voting purposes, because this is part of a larger system with system of motor vehicles, Secretary of State, and a lot, Department of Administration, which does not update each other. We decided, with the staff position as well, to have no position on this piece of legislation. Is there any comments or questions about it?
Commissioner.
Sorry, I was at the end of the legislative
Mhm.
committee, but just could you summarize what the
So the,
concern was?
absolutely, yeah, so
I
in,
guess it was no concern. It's just-
yeah, so right now, many Rhode Islanders that have driver's licenses, even if they're not US citizens, our licenses all look the same. The back of your license has a barcode. Right now, as in the Board of Elections, we use that to scan you into our systems. This bill specifically has the wording so that any barcode attached to the card shall be coded so that it prevents the use to be used to register to vote. One, the legislation already says this ID cannot be used for federal purposes, et cetera. And second, as was brought up by Commissioner DeSimone, let's say I am a legal permanent resident and I become a U.S. citizen, the barcode doesn't update. So if that were to happen, or if I were I would have to go myself and register to vote. So doing that the barcode really doesn't do much. Right now, if you're a person that does not have a legal permanent residency and you have a driver's privilege card, the scanning does not allow you still to vote. And there's also, registering and things of that sort.
Now, imagine if you tried to use that to vote, that you wouldn't be found.
You wouldn't be found in the
voting record,
system,
right?
correct, because you're not registered to vote.
Would it work the other way if someone did become a legal citizen? Would they were able to register to vote? Or would it not?
They would have to register to vote through the Secretary of State, not through the DMV.
Correct.
So let's say you became a U.S. citizen last month, and today you're voting, right, like you did today. Because you registered with the Secretary of State, your ID is, your license then would be a form of ID that scans, but it wouldn't find, you didn't do it through the DMV. Am I correct? I think.
Well, if you're not a citizen, you become a citizen, the DMV for up to 5 years wouldn't know that unless you specifically went down to the DMV with your certificate of naturalization and showed it to them so they could register you in their system as being a U.S. citizen. So if you waited until your driver's license had to be renewed, you could do that at that point. But in that time, you could still go register to vote online through the Secretary of State's portal. You could fill out a paper form. So you will be registered to vote because you are a United States citizen. Many of them do it at their oath ceremony. But the Department of Motor Vehicles will still have in their records that the person is a non-citizen until they actually go there and show them proof of citizenship to the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Is that, I don't want to ask too many questions, but it'd be interesting to know for the future, just because I don't know what's encoded on that barcode, may just be like name and address. I don't know.
So it's very basic identifiers, such as your name, your date of birth, and your first name, last name, date of birth, which the system uses to find the most likely match. Usually it's a direct match, but then there are also percentage variables that it can hit because your name might be slightly different than what's on your driver's license. For example, some people on their driver's license might have their married name, 2 surnames, versus on their voter record, they might only have their married name. So it's smart enough that it can figure out sometimes if it's not an exact match, it's probably a very likely match that the poll workers can pick from. So it's very basic information that's encoded in that barcode.
Yeah, I would just think it probably would work actually if they are registered to vote. Because it's not reaching back into the DMV to say are they a citizen or not. But
No.
they have that connection. So probably another reason not to put that.
That was my concern.
Yeah.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
So it's fair to assume that the driver's license is not a voter ID card.
It is not. It's only one of 8 ballot identifications. It's the only one that we scan at the polling place. So a U.S. passport, a U.S. education, or a college ID are also valid. Tribal ID are also valid. Medicaid card, a military ID is also valid. So this is the only one that we have the capability to scan. The other ones would have to be used manually, meaning that they'd have to see it and manually enter in and find the name manually on the electronic poll book.
So it just shows, just shows the person, but it's not proof that he registered to vote.
It proves their identity, and then the registration is confirmed when they look their record up on the electronic poll book.
Great, thank you.
Correct.
Anyone else?
Sorry, one additional question, HB 304, what is the reason for changing it to Tuesday from Monday?
It's to mirror the change in federal law. And I think there were 2 bills like that we handled. One was Wednesday to Tuesday. And then 3057 and 3058 are individual pieces of Senate legislation that we've already approved on the House side.
Yep, correct.
And it's duplicate language, and we just actually asked Rob Rock to speak on that. He was kind enough to do that for us.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Great.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Do we have a motion? Oh, no. We don't need a motion?
We do, we need
We
a
do.
motion.
Discuss and,
for-
oh, and vote
Yep.
upon. Yep.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
What is the motion?
Oh, I'll make a motion to support the
Sorry.
subcommittee's recommendations.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to support the subcommittee's recommendations. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Agenda item number 5, the board may hear and consider any election matter that requires an immediate ruling or determination arising from the Cranston special referendum election pursuant to Title 17 of the Rhode Island General Laws. Miguel?
One moment. Honorable members of the board, I'm pleased to report that I have no issue to report to the board regarding today's special election that would require an immediate ruling or determination. I did personally visited 3 of the 6 polling places this morning to observe voting being conducted. We did have minor issues in terms of the electronic poll books with syncing. We did have an issue which was resolved very quickly where the blank paper stock for some of the locations for the express vote was a 17-inch which was used in the presidential preference primary versus the 14-inch which we use in the special elections. That was immediately rectified by the staff because they did have those on hand, so that was corrected before anyone was impacted. Other than that, as a summary for the voting today, as of just a little while ago, 641 voters of the 60,188 eligible voters in Cranston have voted for an approximate turnout so far of barely 1%. 366 voters voted during the early voting period, which ended at 4:15 yesterday, as you know. In addition to myself out there this morning, we did have another staff member deployed to support those 6 polling places in operation. Did not have any other equipment issues with either the express votes or the DS-200s to report. We have received of the mail ballots requested. We had 205 mail ballots requested for this Cranston special election. We have received 157 of those ballots, and we still have 58 outstanding. We expect to complete the tabulation of mail ballots this afternoon. We will receive results from the polling places beginning at 8 p.m. Those will be viewable on our website again, as was mentioned previously, as we did for the Charahoe special referendum and the South Kingston referendum. Those will be viewable in a format which was similar to how we have displayed the statewide election results, which has been received favorably by the public and the local boards of canvassers. This includes my Election Day report on the Cranston special referendum. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for Miguel?
I just have one.
Mhm.
So did you say less than 1% turnout at this point?
0.01%, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think at some point we should maybe have a discussion. And I understand some of these will keyed into like federal funding and date restrictions on that funding and also education funding and date restrictions on that. But I think that when we have an election year, I just think some of these special elections are becoming an unnecessary expense. So I think we need to look at them very carefully going forward. That'd be my only suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, agenda item number 6, the board may discuss and vote to adopt the modified rule and regulation 410-RICR-20-00-10 nomination papers. We start with you, Director.
Yes, so we received significant feedback from the Department of State, the ACLU, and Common Cause. We did implement, if not all, most of the feedback submitted by the Department of State, including an updated version that I sent to you just this afternoon, which you should have a printed version, which is very minor changes based on their feedback that we got last night late. And we did consider this feedback submitted by Common Cause and ACLU as well. Many of those were we felt that the intention was the same. The intention of the staff was the same as what they were recommending. They just had different suggestions for language in their request, and I did review those, and I did send them to legal counsel for review. And what you see here before you today is an implementation of any of the changes that were agreed upon by the staff and included in this final version to be approved for promulgation.
Thank you.
I
Yes.
should, Miguel, we spoke this morning at length. I went over some of the minor changes that the secretary provided. But just looking this over now, it just triggered a memory. And I was out for part of last week, so I think I missed this. But on 10.5, pattern of forgery, did we decide to do anything on that 10.51 on the consistent pattern? I remember that came up at the last hearing, and I can't recall if we were going to do anything with that language or not.
Well, the
And I
biggest,
apologize for missing that.
yeah, the pattern, I don't believe, I think there were some questions, and I think we got some questions earlier as well on some of the legislation that's being proposed by the Secretary of State's office about what the pattern means, and Deputy Secretary of State Rob Rock explained some of the intent behind the legislation, which our regulation mirrors fairly closely. So the pattern is meant to not have local boards reporting where they disqualify many signatures because they don't match. That does not necessarily mean that every single signature in every single town is a potential fraud. So if they see potentially certain collectors having a significant number, a pattern of deceased voters or clearly fraudulently signatures or persons that are not registered, then that would be something that they would forward to our attention. We're trying to strike a balance between getting a report from all 39 cities and towns that they have disqualifications versus filtering out what are reasonable assumptions or reasonable patterns of fraud that they suspect. And I also want to point out one of the biggest changes with this nomination papers that we did remove these regulations was we did remove the requirement for the driver's license to be provided by the collector, and that was based on the feedback that we had gotten from Common Cause, ACLU, from the local boards, and from the Secretary of State's office. Although we as a staff, we still feel that is important. We do recognize that it would create a hardship for the local boards of canvassers to have to redact those. We were comfortable with removing it, but we just recognize that as a part of the staff's effort to improve this process, and that was just one of the ideas that we had brought forward.
Thank you. Any other questions for Miguel or Ray? Does the board wish to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I just have one question.
Sure.
with the council. So Ray, in looking at the regulation, I think it mirrors that legislation that we just looked at. But if that area where you indicated in 10.5 in subsection 4, this is actually what I wanted to ask you about is in subsection 4, it speaks about suspected forged signatures, which I guess is our, I will say, authority or our review rather than a consistent pattern. So is that any distinction as far as you're concerned? And should we be changing that in any way? Because that consistent pattern of forged signatures, I think, is directed toward the local boards.
I think that's right. I think that the multiple signatures under the consistent pattern is something that language is designed to be a higher threshold to alert across the entire state versus the Secretary of State, who could be notified for fewer when there is a discrepancy. So there is that kind of difference to try to have some threshold in there to before you have the local authorities initiate a series of investigations. So there, I think that difference is intentional.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make a motion?
I'll move support of the regulation.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to support the rules and regulations. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Agenda item number 7, the board may discuss and vote to accept the request for termination of recognition for the No Labels Rhode Island party.
Honorable members of the board, as you know, we were notified earlier this month on May 6th from the No Labels Party requesting termination of their official recognition as a registered party in the state of Rhode Island. And they're seek termination of recognition of the No Labels Rhode Island Party and all its functions, duties, requirements, and processes under Rhode Island general law. As you know, they did earlier this year obtain the necessary approximately 18,000 signatures that were validated by the local boards of canvassers when they were seeking that official party recognition. And that being done, set in motion a series of steps that the state board and the Secretary of State's office has taken in order to implement that recognition. That includes the new voter registration form, which would include the party along with Democrat, Republican, who would have no labels and unaffiliated as an option on the voter registration form. That is ready to be posted to our website. It is simply waiting for the outcome of a decision by the board. The central voter registration system, there's been work done by the Secretary of State's office to make changes in the central voter registration system so that if they do receive a form, that those forms could be processed. If someone did register in the No Labels Party, they could be processed and entered in by the local boards. And the online voter registration system also had to have some work done on it in order for that to happen, for someone to have that selection available for them on the online. The processes and within these two agencies is fairly straightforward, and it's something that we were able to readily accomplish. More difficulty is with the Department of Motor Vehicles, because as you know, their systems are quite extensive. And anytime there is a change, it requires a substantial amount of change and steps to go through. Because not only do they have their internal systems within their offices and their branches statewide and the AAA offices, they also have several online portals where you can either renew your driver's license, where that question is going to be presented to you. And they also have a portal to renew your vehicle registration, where that question could be potentially proposed to you as well. Based on our discussions with the Department of Motor Vehicles, a workaround for the actual physical branches would be to just provide a paper form in the interim. But to actually implement these changes for the online portals and their internal systems, they do not expect that to happen until after the election, the actual election occurring, and that's how long it would take to make those substantial changes. That being said, the No Labels Party, if they do not field a candidate for November, which I do not believe they expect to, for president, based on their communications and what's readily available in news media, they will lose that 5% recognition, that 5% to still be recognized. They would need to obtain 5% in the November election in order to keep that recognition for the next 2 years. If they don't field the candidate, they're not going to get the 5%. So all the steps that are being taken now and all the steps that will be taken by the Department of Motor Vehicles will have to be reversed, and for that recognition to be removed from the applicable forms and all the systems that are affected by it. I know that we did reach out to the No Labels Party. They do have someone here. I don't know if you would have any questions of them. And I also turn it over to Ray to talk about the bylaws and then the other aspects of this that we did provide to you, printouts of the party bylaws to have as a reference when Ray does discuss them.
So I guess if we could hear from Ray, and I did see that the chairman of the party, Gary Sass, is here. So if we wish to hear from him after, we could do that.
I think that would be good, Madam Chair, to hear from Mr. Sasse. Miguel and I have spoken about this a few times now, and there are no easy answers. And perhaps once we hear from Mr. Sass, they will get more clarified. But at this point, we really don't have any record as to what has occurred with the party. The only record we have are the actions that led up to the March 19 vote, where you did recognize legally under 1719 that, or 1712 section 9, that the requisite number of signatures had been gathered, validated, and therefore could be the No Labels Party could become a cognizable Rhode Island party. Fast forward 2 months to May 6, where the chair says that they wish to dissolve the party. We have nothing by way of corporate act on that. We have nothing by way of a corporate decision vote on that. We have no record at all of what's been done other than Mr. Sass's letter indicating that there is an intention to dissolve the corporation, the party. Under our statutes, which are very, very limited on point, the only way that we have to dissolve a political party is, as Miguel said, when after the next presidential election or gubernatorial election, the candidate that has been fielded for that office fails to meet 5% of the elected vote. And then by statute, the dissolution is automatic. In fact, the board could recognize that occurred, but nothing would be needed for the board to decide. It is something that occurs by statute and by the will of the voters, really. So we're kind of in this position where monies will be incurred to implement a party that is basically a ghost. And that's a problem, and I can appreciate that. I cannot look to our statutory toolbox and find you an easy tool to resolve this. We have instead only one statute, and that statute speaks to the 5% at the election, which will happen if we don't have, obviously, a presidential or gubernatorial candidate. One thing I said to Miguel is that we could hear from the chair. I was hoping maybe even that Mr. Flanders or the party's counsel would be here, but we do have another meeting scheduled for next week. We could at least get some input from Mr. Sass, find out what records exist, and gather those to see if for some reason the board thinks that's enough. But that leaves us with one overriding question, which is what authority does the board have to take action beyond what the statute calls for? And that, I guess, we'll decide after we hear from Mr. Sass.
Madam Chair, may I just ask Ray
Yes,
one question?
yes.
Ray, you haven't seen anything with regard to party bylaws or party authorizations?
I have the bylaws,
Okay.
bylaws and constitution, from my review, there's nothing that even speaks to dissolution.
So there's
There's
no
no
process,
mechanism.
there's no process
There's no
outlined there.
mechanism, right. So so I suppose that the committee, the actual party members, if 2/3 vote, that vote could be recognized in some way. We don't even know anything about the members. How many members are there? Are there just 2? Are there 100? We just don't, we have no information. So whatever we do, at the very least, we need to develop a record. Otherwise, I know this is far-fetched, but you could have someone come next week and say, I don't agree with that, and I never voted on that, and I had a right. We'd be getting involved in the corporate dynamics when, at this point, we have no record. We have no record.
Thank you. Mr. Sass, would you wish to? He just, it's finicky. Jacob, will you put that on for him? No, it's not. It's red. Things,
And if Mr.
Thank you.
Sass is just going to speak, that's fine. You can advocate for yourself. But if you had factual information, it would be preferable to have you sworn in.
I'm happy to swear in. I don't know if I have factual information or not to hear it.
But why don't we just swear you in, and then perhaps we can at least start a record with some of the information you provide.
and I do that, right? I
Yes,
swear him in.
yes.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
No, first of all, let me apologize for even being in the situation. We had hoped to field a candidate, and we said we would not go forward unless we found somebody we felt could win. And we made a judgment that that was not the case. So we're not fielding a candidate. As far as the Board of Elections is concerned, anything that you need, if you would let me know, I'll try to get to you. I am not an attorney, so my knowledge is fairly general. But as been pointed out, No Labels has requested termination of its party status. No Labels, as I said, is not going forward with its sole mission. And when you read our bylaws, there's one mission, and that was to nominate a candidate for president and vice president in the 2024 election. That's just not going to happen. Because No Labels is not going forward with the sole mission, then there is no legal mechanism or possibility that the party will be in existence after November election. And so we believe that it's in the interest of time of Board of Elections, DMV, others, and also the public to be as efficient as possible. And we think the termination, that would be now. As far as membership is concerned, we have a chairman, we have a secretary, Alina Goldstein, we have Vice Chairman Eddie Marzullo. I am not aware, and we have other people who have did volunteer to be electors if we were successful. I don't have their names. I'm not sure what their status is as far as if being a member of a party or not, if they did volunteer to be electors. As I say, is if anything that you need from us, I can try my best to get it to you. But it's, somebody used the description, ghost party. That's exactly what it is. And our judgment is that under 17, 1, 2, a party could either choose to have a primary or not have a primary. If I'm reading that law correctly, we are not going forward. We're not going to do anything. To my knowledge, we don't have a membership, base. And so I just think it'd be most efficient from the point of view of the public and this board to terminate as soon as possible.
Perhaps I could just ask a few questions and then unless the board wants to initiate that, and then I could follow up.
Go ahead.
No,
Oh, okay.
I'll defer to legal
All right.
counsel.
Mr. Sass, just you're directly related to the National No Labels Party?
Yeah, and I really can't speak about that relationship because the National No Labels Party has been setting the ground rules by which we've been operating. And I depend upon a legal counsel affiliated, that was affiliated with No Labels to advise us.
But do you know if the national entity is still in existence? Is that going through the process of dissolution too?
I can't answer that question. I know, I believe that they're going through this process individually in states, what they're doing actually.
Now, when you gathered over 18,000 recognized signatures, I imagine that you had some membership that was serving almost like an infrastructure for that purpose. Do you have members of your organization?
No, the signature gathering was done nationally, and as you know, they retained a service of consultant to go and gather the signatures. To my knowledge, there was no one from Rhode Island or specifically involved unless the signatures gatherers themselves were being paid were from Rhode Island.
I see. Have you, when I say you, I certainly mean your political party. Have you been preparing and maintaining minutes of any corporate actions taken? By,
They were done nationally. No, in terms of Rhode Island, answers no.
and was there actually some type of a meeting held by the local party, which I would understand would be at least the 3 or 4 gentlemen or individuals you mentioned, for the purpose of deciding to dissolve? How was that action taken, I guess, is a more important question.
I was requested by the national people to request a resolution dissolving of the party. There were no meetings.
There were no meetings, okay. And you don't have to tell me who represents you, for example, but do you still have legal counsel locally?
That's a good question. I haven't spoken to Bob Flanders about this for some time. Now, whether he's still representing us, I deal with legal counsel for No Labels.
Okay.
They're named Nick Connors.
I'll leave it open to the board to ask questions if it wishes, but it does seem that at the very least, we need some kind of a record of a gathering, a decision, a vote. The bylaws themselves require a 2/3 vote of the members. There should be some document that shows who consists of that membership. There should be some vote to adopt those minutes. And I'm just thinking that if we continue this for a week, it might allow Mr. Sass to reach out to an attorney, whether it's learned counsel Justice Flanders or others to give him some guidance on that. As you can imagine, given my role for you, I cannot guide anyone who appears before us with any kind of advice, but I can at least ask some questions like I have that would give direction, and certainly an attorney for the party would know what might be needed. Is that something where even if,
No, I'll put Nick Connors in touch with you. That would be the most, I think, efficient way to go about it.
I mean,
Commissioner.
I'll move to continue it to next week. I'd like to see a couple of things just for me personally. I'd like to see either something on a corporate level indicating that you've got authority to withdraw the process after the collection of signatures, and I assume it was a burdensome process to get the 18,000 signatures, but I mean, I think we need to see something locally, or even something from the national committee that would authorize you to withdraw, or a request from the national committee. But I think it has to be couched with some kind of authority, and I mean, I'll leave it to Ray as to make a determination as to what it is, whether it's a resolution or even some type of vote from the national party authorizing someone to do it. I'd be willing to accept that from my end, but
and we'd have to actually make sure that it is,
correct.
that it conforms to the bylaws, because
Right.
the bylaws may not speak to
Right.
that oversight on decision-making, but
So,
that-
and whatever that is, and if you could submit, it's something that for me, if it was submitted by legal counsel, I think it would probably be to your benefit, but, you know, I leave you to however you want to do that. But for me, that's what I'm looking for before I can vote on this.
Commissioner?
I just, Ray, a question, in section 4E of their bylaws, it says action outside of meeting. It appears that they can take an action outside of meeting if they have a majority of the committee. So would that be a way to do it? Or Mr.
It very well may be, and that majority,
Committee via email to agree that, I mean, I don't know if the committee list exists or who's on the committee, what the majority would look like.
yeah, I think you're exactly right. There's at least that one provision and others in here that allow you to do that. It's a matter of just making sure that when it comes back before us, we can say, the board can say that they're comfortable that some type of notice was provided to whoever was a member. A vote was taken. Here are the minutes. These minutes have been adopted formally. And at least you have some record of a corporate act that you can proceed with.
Mhm.
And that would be the 3 offices of no language Rhode.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sess, I didn't,
Excuse me,
I apologize.
the 3 persons that serve as officers of no language Rhode Island.
If that's your membership, it
That's
sounds like that is your membership, yes. I mean, certainly they would be at the very least the members, since they are your officers.
And if I provided the board with signed letters from them so requesting, that would be sufficient.
I would obviously counsel you to seek Mr. Flanders or another attorney, but we would want to have a record of a corporate act as opposed to individual actions, much like this board could not do things separately, nor can your vote be something that it should be done in some type of a meeting setting, whether that is virtual or in person. I leave that to you.
So for me, I would like to see some type of a record of the meeting, either attested to by the secretary or by the president, whoever that is. That there was an actual meeting held, again, as council said, either virtually or via telephone or in person, however you normally would meet, to indicate that you were seeking a formal withdrawal. And anything, I would feel a lot better if there was something from the national committee too, but I leave them to that. That's part, as far as that goes.
Well, I'll request something from the national.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Schultz?
Yes. Gary, just get this little context and put this in some sort of background here. After the No Labels Party was approved as a party, did you or any member of the party file anything with the Campaign Finance and Board of
I
Elections?
think, I believe I did.
So-
If we did, there'd be records here, but I think we did.
So you would designate a treasurer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so you at least have one member.
No, so we have three.
He said
Okay,
he,
yeah.
yeah.
Chairman, the vice
Yeah.
chairman, and secretary treasurer. Those are
Okay.
the three.
And as far as your corporate structures, did you ever file anything with the Secretary of State?
Not to my bylaws, but
Just the bylaws, but no association,
I don't believe
membership,
so.
everything?
I'd have to check. I don't recall. I don't recall signing.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you make I think you made a motion, but I don't want
I
to
would
shut
make-
down any other discussion. Commissioner Connor?
So a question for Ray. Earlier you spoke about that there's no specific mention of dissolving a party other than if they don't reach the 5%. So if this board took no action and we went and just let the process and election play out, how would that look?
Well, that would certainly work, and that would satisfy the statutory scheme, and that would be the ordinary way of doing it. This is being considered to bypass or to prevent, I should say, expenditures by the state in preparing forms, fields, and computers, et cetera, when we don't really have a party that would benefit from it. We just have, we don't have any candidates. Now, I'm just thinking, I don't think this is happening, but I suppose somebody could jump up and say that they're actually going to run, and they may not ever get the support of the local party. And the party makes very clear that they won't be supporting anyone other than what comes from the national. Those kind of dynamics haven't played out. I suppose they could, and I suppose that person could receive more than 5%, at which time the party would actually even continue. So I can't say to the board that I'm still wrestling with what we can do, but I think the first step is to see what kind of documentation we receive. And then I can look to see if there's any other power that we would have. None comes to mind. That's going to be for next Wednesday, I suppose, that I have to tell the board whether or not I even think you have the authority, because I know what you can do by statute. And I know what the statute says. I just don't know what else we can do, but I will give that serious consideration and report back to the board by next Wednesday.
So when you talk about sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
When you talk about the cost associated with providing election materials, there's also a cost with reversing all the things that have happened up to this point, right? With a timeline of the election, correct?
Most of the costs associated with this will be with the Department of Motor Vehicles, because they have a contractual obligations with the vendor that handles both their website and their internal system. So there would be a cost to having those changes made into their system, and they have to happen a certain time frame prior. So it has to start relatively soon. But that being said, if this party does not obtain the recognition by getting 5%, then all of that would have to be reversed and spent again to undo what was paid to be done after the November election, and that time frame would play out as well. In the event that someone was to register on the No Labels Party, in the event that they lost that recognition, they would automatically be reverted to be unaffiliated. If the party affiliation was recognition was allowed to continue, then anyone after November that is registered as under the No Labels Party would become unaffiliated once that party ceases to become recognized, because they lack the 5% of a candidate obtaining the 5%.
As of this point, is anybody able to register under that party? As of right now, is there any system where they can register to vote as a member of the No Labels?
Unless they write in, it's not, I was to ask Kathy, but there are some, they're waiting to activate those changes in the Central Voter Registration System and the online portal. But at this time, there is not that ability now. And the registration form is ready to be posted, and there is an other field, so someone would have to write in other But again, they couldn't be processed through the central voter registration system yet because that field has not been activated.
Commissioner.
Madam Chair? Yes,
Commissioner
thank
Schultz.
you. Mr. Sass, I have to ask you one other question. Has the party raised any money?
No, not in Rhode Island.
Not in Rhode Island, so you have no bank account? Okay, so just name only, that's all it is.
Yeah, I get the impression that you just referred to, the easiest thing would just be in existence until we can get 5%. But I think from, our perspective and from the state's perspective, there are unfortunate costs involved in waiting that time, plus whatever confusion exists. So I appreciate, the questions. It becomes moot in 5-6 months. But I'll get the information for you.
Ray, I have-
Chair, I'd like to ask Miguel one question. What's the deadline by which a party has to comply with the Campaign Finance Act?
The deadline in terms of
Reporting money coming in, expenditures and all that sort of stuff.
they would have a deadline of, well, they did file with, I know that because I connected them with Richard Thornton, our Director of Campaign Finance. But their schedule would fall in line almost similar to what candidates' requirements are. So you would have the 30 days, the 7 days. And so they're on a similar timeline, not exactly, but a similar timeline to candidates. And I don't believe they've reported any expenditures or raising of money yet.
So what date, what would the next date be?
I would have to get back to you on the exact date for the next filing deadline, for the next meeting, if you want to have that in context.
Right, but once they withdraw, there's no need for them to file anything? And then they would have to withdraw their, the forms that filed with campaign finance?
They would have the ability to dissolve their campaign finance account by filling out the appropriate paperwork, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Can I ask a question? If somebody hypothetically, wanted to run as a no labels candidate, is there a requirement to maintain petition signatures to get on the ballot? And if that's the case, when will be the time frame?
Oh,
This would be, you're saying for some office other than president?
Yeah.
Then it would just be the ordinary candidacy requirements of any other person who's seeking an endorsement, which I think was being in mid or early June for the declaration process to begin, right?
Correct. Later this month, yes.
Ray, I just wanted to ask you one other thing. If for next week, if you could also briefly touch on like what the courts have held on these party issues, because my understanding of party issues is that party issues are private issues, they are not state issues.
It's an intersection between the private rights, as you're saying, of a party. Clearly, there is case law on that. But over the years, over the decades, the courts have, on a number of occasions, found that requiring parties to comply with all of the primary and election laws, even though they may not be always consistent with bylaws, in order to have a transparent and uniform election system, those have been upheld. So even these bylaws, to my memory, I'd have to look at it more carefully, use words to the effect that to the extent these bylaws are conform to the applicable state laws, the following shall take place. So it really is an intersection. There is on that. There is a right to association, and as one court said, there's a right to not associate. So there are.
So then I guess the concern would become is this is a national party, right?
It is a national
So-
party,
so-
we believe. I don't know if it
so-
still exists or not.
So if the national party still exists, and let's say I'm a member of the No Labels Party in North Carolina, I say, running for president. The North Carolina No Labels people say, yep, he's running for president. The people in Rhode Island could certainly vote for that candidate. It's a presidential candidate. Just because the Rhode Island contingent says we're not fielding a candidate. I don't know that the Rhode Island contingent can
It's-
say,
it's
we're
all-
not fielding the presidential.
There are a
candidate."
lot of unknowns here. There are a lot of
So,
questions. There are a lot
again,
of things that could
And I'm not trying to
happen.
put you on the
Yeah.
spot, but these are just popping into my
Yep,
head as
yep.
we talk. So I do agree we should continue it. So I'm going to move to continue it again, but I think.
And
I
one
think
last point on
Commissioner
that is we don't, I
Scholes
mean,
has-
there's a question of fidelity. How faithful will the local organizations be to the bylaws of, that created them? I mean, who's going to stop them? Another way of putting it. So there are a lot of questions here that we certainly don't know the answers to.
And then, so if you have one more thing, and then I think
Commissioner
unless there's anything we can't talk about next week when we have more information that needs to be said today, but go ahead,
What I was gonna-
Commissioner Schultz.
I'm just going to respond to Commissioner DeSimone. I think it's my understanding that a person who's running for any party for president must qualify in every state in order to be on the ballot. Even though a person may qualify in another state,
I understand
that
that.
person's not going to be on the ballot in this state.
Understand
Yeah.
that, but to qualify in the state, you've got a party that we've already qualified.
Yep.
And if the national committee says he's our candidate, I don't know that the local group can say he's not our candidate.
But his name won't
It'd be like the Democrats saying, we don't want Joe Biden to be our candidate. I mean, it would be silly.
Well, that's being played out right now in the state of Ohio. Yeah. So
Okay.
the Democrats have that issue. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Sass. We have a motion to continue this matter. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm not even going to ask any further discussion. All in favor to continue this matter to next week, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And
Tentatively for next Wednesday, yes.
I think that's it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned at 3:07 PM. Thank you, everyone.